For centuries, psychics and mediums have attempted to pull back the dark curtain of mystery that separates the land of the living from the realm of the dead. Some claim to have successfully recorded spirit voices on electronic equipment. In 1920, Thomas Edison experimented with a device designed to pick up the voices of those beyond the grave. What were the strange sounds captured by this updated version of Edison's machine? Are we ready to establish direct communication with the spirit world? Man has always been frightened by the dark, troubled by the sound of echoing laughter or hollow footsteps passing down long, empty corridors. At the S&A studios in Hollywood, California, there has been a history of occurrences that some say is beyond the realm of understanding. Many of the tales emanate from behind the massive doors of soundstage number 1. Mary Pickford once acted here. Cecil B. DeMille directed. One man recreates his own astonishing story.
My name is Jerry Fitzpatrick. I was the construction coordinator at this studio for approximately 4 years. It is one of the oldest sound stages in Hollywood. It was one particular night I remember I worked all night by myself. We had a large set to build and I was here alone laying it out. I was tired, but I remember I stepped back over in this area to take a look at what I had done. But at that time, there used to be a catwalk right up here, about 15 feet off the ground, from one end of the soundstage to the other. Also, at that time, there was a staircase that came from this door down to floor level. It was approximately 2 o'clock in the morning. I heard the door open and close and footsteps coming down the catwalk. I immediately called out, "Who's there?" And the footsteps stopped. There was total silence. So I ran up the steps to check the door, and the door was bolted, like all the security doors were, and the alarm system was on. The hour was late and I was tired, but I heard that door open and close, and footsteps coming down the catwalk.
Some have suggested the theory that the dead may occasionally re-enter our own time and space. Confused by their predicament, the spirits may call out for help or attempt to communicate. Many would suggest that the strange noises in this old studio are the product of overactive imaginations, but others aren't so certain. Could spirits actually be attempting to speak to us? One man may have uncovered evidence that implies spirit communication may occur with remarkable frequency. D. Scott Rogo is the author of Phone Calls from the Dead.
Well, I first heard about these cases when I first entered the field, which was close to 10, 12 years ago. And I really didn't take them seriously at all. I thought they were very outlandish. It was hard for me to believe that people were actually getting phone calls from people who were dead. But as the years progressed and I did more and more investigations, I discovered that these calls were fairly common. And then I realized that there was a major effect here that someone really had to study.
Mary Meredith of Oklahoma City recreates the night she purportedly received a phone call from the dead.
Hello? Of course, I don't tell everybody about it, because a lot of people still think that I'm crazy when they even hear about it. But I know that it was, and it happened to me.
Mary Meredith's case occurred in 1977. She had just been in the hospital. She had returned to her home not knowing that there was a letter waiting for her telling her that her cousin had died. She had been very close to this cousin. It was very soon after she read this letter from her mother that the phone rang, and it was from her cousin.
It just really upset me when I got the phone call, and I hung up on the first phone call because it upset me. But when she called back again, I said, I cannot believe that anyone would call someone and tell them that it's their cousin when my cousin is dead. I can't believe this. I said, and I have been sick, and I can't believe anyone would pull something on me like this. She said, but I know you've been sick. I was at the hospital with you. And I said, what are you talking about? And the phone started getting crackling, and then I couldn't hear. It just faded away.
The idea that the dead can contact the living through electromagnetic devices is certainly not new with my research. Thomas Edison, for instance, several years before his death, became very fascinated with the idea that he could invent a machine that could bring through the voices of the dead, and even apparently made some sketches of such equipment. Edison, as is well known, was extremely paranoid about his ideas and kept them very, very hidden, so he never patented his ideas. But certain sketches did surface after his death, which purported to be the machine he was working on.
The year is 1920. Thomas Edison is 73 years old, inventor of the light bulb, the phonograph, the motion picture camera, and countless other devices. The grand old man of science focuses his genius on audio contact with the spirit world. Edison claimed his research was unfruitful, but some believe he was on the verge of success. In another laboratory, 60 years later, an inventor may be following in Edison's footsteps. Al Manning is the head of the ESP Center in Los Angeles, California.
You might not expect a person with a background in aerospace to be interested in spirit contact and other psychic things, but it happened for me in a very practical way. I was studying a big printout of figures, and I knew there was a mistake on the page, not knowing where, but as I ran my finger down the column, I felt a buzz under it. And sure enough, when we checked that line, that was where the mistake was. This was certainly enough to kindle my interest in spirit contact in the occult. And it led to a study of ritual and ceremony to enhance the contact with spirit and other magical things.
As Manning's research efforts grew, he gathered around him a group interested in exploring the field of spirit contact. If they succeed, the potential rewards could be immense. Some believe that an awesome source of knowledge may become available to those able to break through the barrier that separates the living from the dead. Al Manning recreates a moment when he claims he accomplished direct contact with a spirit entity.
I was sitting in meditation one day, and a spirit showed me a picture of a device, wild-looking thing, and spoke the word mica. I didn't understand it. I said, do you mean formica? Very clearly it came back, no, mica. I don't know how it works.
While photographing Al Manning's crystal device, cameras recorded a possibly strange phenomenon. Is it a reflection, a defect in the film emulsion, or like Thomas Edison, has Al Manning made a breakthrough of possible scientific significance?
The work of Thomas Edison, both in his research methods and his persistence, have always fascinated me. So when we came across partial plans for a device that he had been working on to contact spirit by recording their voices, we thought we would try once more in this area. We have done other things in the past unsuccessfully. And I don't know if this one is going to work, but we're going to use the old home recorder for the cone particularly, along with an extra long antenna with flashing lights in hopes of attracting the local spirits to us so that they can participate in recording the voices.
What explanation is there for the remarkable sounds recorded through Al Manning's machine late at night in the graveyard? In an old cemetery in Sierra Madre, California, members of the Orange County Society of Psychic Research have gathered to try some unusual experiments. On this day, various electronic devices will be tested for their ability to contact the dead. Harry Shepard directs the group.
We are feeling for vibrations from the various markers. And you can feel the outline of the spirit, and when they're there, you can sense it. And this is the way we determine the best area to do the spirit voice recordings.
I get a sinking feeling here, and the child on the other side, I get a pulling over there.
It's just like shots of electricity are coming out of the ends of your fingers, not on the stone. It's cold, too, the stones.
Yeah. There's two very, very strong entities right in this area. Very strong.
You could feel
I like it right in
coming
here.
from the other
Well, later I
stone.
like
right
yeah.
around
But
here,
in
yeah.
other parts it was cold. This one here, feel this one here, Dick.
This would be a very good spot
Yeah.
to tape, right in here.
Well, that is. That's different, isn't it? Side is a little
It's
cooler.
even different over
Try
We have so
both
many
places.
great locations now.
Yeah, this place is fantastic. The cemetery is one of the best in the area.
As the group gathered psychic impressions, technicians began setting up a battery of recording equipment.
Okay, we'll be going just after dark. Check your levels. Okay.
Microphones and cable were strung out to areas that attracted the psychics. Fresh recording tape was carefully loaded into each machine and labeled.
Now that the sun is set and it's dark here, you're always reminded that you wonder what kind of spirits you might run into in a graveyard, but it feels comfortable here, so let's see how it all comes out. Over here, we have our updated version of the Edison machine. We've incorporated the crystal because it gave us an interesting auric manifestation before. And this wire leads to the antenna with the flashing lights. And behind us are the tape recorders in case we get some sounds that will need a serious analysis later.
Why don't we try to get into a very relaxed state. Everybody close your eyes and just breathe normally. And let that beautiful, relaxed feeling start to flow down your face, down your arms, down to your legs, and out your feet. And go receptive at every breath you take. If there's any spirit entities here that would like to communicate with us, we have 3 microphones mounted on this pedestal. You may speak into any of these 3 microphones, or you may rap on them for a yes or no answer.
How long have you been in spirit world?
Is there anyone on Earth that you would like us to deliver a message to for you?
Is there anything that we can do?
The questions continued all night. When the session was over, more than 5,000 feet of tape had passed through the recorders.
Thank you for your cooperation.
The following weeks were spent analyzing the sounds recorded at the graveyard. Technician John Kawamoto spent over 30 hours noting the dozens of unusual sounds on the tapes. When his log was complete, The psychics were invited to listen to the tapes and interpret what they heard.
Joe, you ready?
What is that?
What's
Right
that?
there. I know.
What is that? Whoa.
It's a growling.
Yeah. Joe, you ready?
Right there.
Wow, listen to that.
Somebody's singing in the
Back it off
background.
here.
Joe, you ready?
Right there.
Remember that one tape that we got before that had that real weird voicing in it, that real bad sounding voice? That sounds similar to a Dick. Very, very similar to that one.
Right.
Remember we did that about 3 years ago, and we got that rrrr sound.
Oh, and there's that.
Yeah, that is a beautiful one.
Okay, now that we listen to the microphones, let's take a look at the telephone and see what we see.
We got some fantastic stuff earlier. Let's see what we have here. If there's any spirits here, we now have this telephone with us that is attached to this microphone and at this tape recorder through here. And you can use this now, if you wish, with the other microphones to communicate with us.
Can you hear me?
That's loud. That's a very loud and clear.
Go back.
Yeah,
With
let's
normal
back it
speed,
up.
we'll hear the clicking, and if we slow it down to 16th or 1/16th of the speed, slows the voice way down, and we can stretch it out and hear the syllables in it instead of just a click or a pop sound.
That's right, because a lot of times when we slow it down, we can hear a word that normally you couldn't hear
You
at
wouldn't
normal
normally
speed.
hear.
Right. But I
Okay, this
didn't know whether
is
it's
slowed
supposed to
down
say
to 16 times, or we'll try it and see what happens.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Wow.
Okay, I just went back. I'll go forward again.
Is that at normal speed?
Yeah. What? It's definitely 2 words.
Sound like,
Yeah,
sound
16.
like it said listen that time.
It's the same. Get 2 different voices.
Help me, boy.
Help
That
me
was
backwards.
really clear. That was really clear backwards now. And listen was forward, right?
Uh-huh. It's a... Excellent voice. You know, sound quality of it was very, very good.
And I think, too, the importance is slowing the tape and
Tape
speeding down.
down.
Something that you think is just a pop, you know, and this sort of taping can turn out to be all kinds of things.
Now let's see how we did with the Edison machine.
I think
Yeah,
that's a
let's
great
go
idea.
do that. Let's see what the Edison machine shows us.
Hey, get it going here.
To our spirit friends, would you please direct your answers into the horn so that we can record them readily?
Are you happy where you are now?
Do you like this form of communications?
Do you have any suggestions for improving our equipment for easier communication with you?
Would you prefer that we turn off the blinking lights?
Is Thomas Edison with you?
Can we slow that,
Oh, listen, right
that
there.
down and
Look,
listen to
Okay.
yeah.
that's right where that
Right.
humming started, right
That-
there when you
that's where
turn the
it
lights
sounds
on.
like singing or
Yeah.
something, yeah. The slower
And
might
it was
we-
just when the lights got turned on.
Right.
You want it slow.
Yeah, 16. Let's do it at the 16th speed. Listen to the humming noise.
It's like a lot of activity or something centered right inside.
You know what it actually sounds like? It's energy
Stop. Dick,
vortex. Like an energy vortex in there.
That's what I'm saying. It's like a center of
It's only
energy.
dynamo, I tell you. This
It's a good
Got his
machine.
dynamo working.
Interesting.
It's a,
Is there any way that that machine could have been creating that type of sound from the inside?
No, the machine wouldn't create it from the inside, but that horn will really focus the energy so that when the spirit would direct the energy into the horn, you'd get that kind of a manifestation.
Okay, but there's not any kind of way that from inside, like because of whirling or machinery or something?
Nothing is moving in there. The
And
horn is
that's
perfectly
really
still.
interesting.
There was nothing connected.
The energy, vortex right there in the which
While the
causes
pops, squeaks, and whines recorded at the graveyard may not constitute hard evidence of spirit contact, Harry has a suggestion for those who doubt his work.
If people are a bit skeptical, if they would try it themselves at least once, then there's a very good chance that they would get something on tape themselves, if they do it with an open mind.
Will we ever have a major breakthrough in the field of spirit-voice contact?
Just as many of us are interested in trying to establish contact with the dead might be just as interested in contacting the living. Phone calls from the dead, cases of voices that appear on electronic recording equipment, and other similar manifestations might be the successful result of active experimentation on the other side to make contact with the living. There may come a day in the very distant future when contact with the dead is an everyday occurrence. But the major breakthrough leading to this result might actually be due to experiments produced by scientists on the other side and not through any attempts by us on this side of death.
One Saturday in 1905, in the city of Manchester, England, a factory worker by the name of William Hope set out to photograph a friend. Mr. Hope, an amateur photographer, had been through the same process many times before, and certainly nothing about this day was different than any other. Once in the developing room, something unusual happened. At first, he wondered if he had forgotten to clean the photographic plates, but it soon became clear what had taken place. The image of a woman had appeared on the photograph. Hope's friend recognized her immediately. It was his sister, who had died 12 years before. Mr. Hope believed he had photographed a ghost. In 1964, this man, Ted Sirios, came to the attention of a group of scientists and psychologists when he claimed to have taken photographs solely with the power of his mind. A series of experiments were conducted that confounded all those present. The photographs he produced were simply unexplainable. In 1874, Sir William Crookes, a scientist and member of the London Psychical Society, was investigating the spiritual medium Florence Cook. It was said that Miss Cook would enter a cabinet and materialize a spirit named Katie King. Though he believed he saw her with his own eyes, he was still not convinced that she and the medium were not one and the same person. To clear up his doubt, he opened the cabinet in which the medium worked. In his own words, "I examined Katie with steadfast scrutiny until I had no doubt whatever of her reality." Vernon Miller is a photographic expert from the Brooks Institute of Photography.
In photography, light is reflected from or absorbed by the subject in the photograph, focused through a lens, and recorded on a light-sensitive material, film, plates, emulsion. The film is light-sensitive, so any energy, any electromagnetic energy can affect the film to some extent. So radiation from all of the various ways, X-ray, so forth, can affect the film. So you might not necessarily see the light that strikes the film. I've seen many examples of accidental ghost photography. I've seen very few, if any, actual examples of a process. Most of the ghost pictures that I've seen are examples of double exposure techniques, where One image was recorded against a dark background, and that image superimposed on a normally lit scene so that you can see the brighter image against the normal scene. This particular picture seems to be quite a production. This is not accidental. The photographer wanted to achieve this effect. There are a few clues. The ghost image is quite bright against a darker background, indicating that he was illuminated some way that would show him against that. We can see 2 or 3 images of the hand as it goes up the banister. Many times there are other clues. The ghost scene will be lit artificially with a directional light, as in this crucifixion scene. It appears that these are miniatures that were lit artificially, and then the combined scene was done in daylight under a different light condition.
Ever since the first photograph was taken in 1826, no images have been more surprising or more controversial than those reported to be ghost photographs. Experts will continue to disagree on a phenomenon that theoretically records the presence of entities that are invisible to the naked eye. Attempts to cross the thin line between life and death have occupied man's mind for centuries. Perhaps photography, recording the subtleties of light and energy, can provide a glimpse into the other realm. William Hope, Sir William Crookes, and others were convinced this is so. This is known as the Armistice photograph and was taken on Remembrance Day near the London War Memorial in 1923. It purportedly shows an entire battalion killed in the Great War and gripped the public imagination like few other photographs before or since. But the question of how these images got onto film is still in debate. Raymond Bayless is a psychic investigator who has researched hundreds of ghost photographs.
There are 2 main theories. One, of course, is that the origin of all psychic phenomena comes from the mind of an individual operating through the subconscious. And the other main theory is that the phenomenon itself is in some way instigated by a surviving spirit. I've taken part in some experiments that I believe were authentic. That is, that authentic psychic photographs were taken. Now, I'm not going to call them spirit photographs because I don't know whether they're the product of a spirit or whether they're a product of an individual's mind or what have you, but nevertheless, I do believe that they were actually psychic photographs. That is, they were paranormal.
This is ordinary Polaroid film, 4 by 5 inches film, and it comes in a light-tight envelope. It can be utilized into any number of normal cameras by inserting it into a holder, film holder. Okay, we insert the film in the back of the camera, and from this standpoint on, it is just like ordinary wet process photography. And I'll snap this picture and make a little demonstration for you. Now, in wet process conventional photography, there's a step in the darkroom where the film is processed and the picture finally printed. And Polaroid or instant photography has the advantage of having all of this done in front of you, so there's no chance for manipulation of the image other than right here before your eyes. So in a few seconds we can open this envelope up and examine the photograph that we just made. And here we have the image that we just photographed just now, and a ghost-like image of another face that was made prior to the exposure just at this time. I'm familiar enough with this process that I would look at any image with a great deal of skepticism.
Many times scientists go into experimenters with blinders on. That is, they have become so biased due to prevailing views, customs of thought, so forth, that they're no longer capable of actually examining an experiment. They may, for example, take part in an experiment, admit that all of the controls were perfect, that there was nothing wrong whatsoever, but then a few days later, they suddenly find that their view is changing. They no longer can accept it. But this is not the result of thought. This is the result, as I say, of a prevailing bias. They simply cannot examine an experiment clearly. There have been spirit photographers that have produced real psychic photographs, and in my opinion, and they have also resorted to fraud. There have been some photographers that apparently never resorted to fraud, or practically never. Bouguer was a very famous early spirit photographer, one of the pioneers, you might say. He made vast numbers of these photographs, some apparently real.
But in 1875, Bouguer was put on trial for fraud by those who felt that the idea of photographing spirits was preposterous. Fraud could not be proved, and Bouguer went on to produce many more spirit photographs, some reportedly under rigid test conditions. Not all such cases were so bitterly fought. In 1917, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle came upon an incident that soon became well known throughout Europe. He reported that two young English girls, while playing in the woods near their home, believed they saw a gathering of fairies. They returned to the spot soon afterward and took these photographs. Skeptics pointed out the suspicious resemblance to several drawings done by Claude Shepperson to illustrate a poem entitled A Spell for a Fairy. Episodes such as this tended to cast doubts on spirit photography. Natural cave formations in Southern California provide photographer Seymour Locks with fertile ground for picking up energies from past civilizations.
Coming into the cave area, what I was feeling was simply that it had been used by somebody. It was just a message that I was getting. There are energies in the earth, sometimes from water, sometimes from minerals, and sometimes from the presence of entities who have used this, because everything in nature has a memory. Rock, whatever, has a memory. And so I would assume that the energies in this area would have to do with the people who lived here at one time, Indian people, whomever. But it has that kind of aura then. But I would assume whenever I work that there are entities around, because my supposition is that I'm assisted on the other side by people who create the imagery.
He believes that his photographs provide evidence of unseen entities. More than 10 years ago, unexplainable images began appearing in photographs taken by Seymour Locks. After much investigation, he has concluded that he has mysterious assistants, and the strange glow apparent in many of his pictures is energy from unseen entities.
This is really beautiful configuration, and it's reminiscent of the opening to the sky that you would find in the mythologies of the American Indian. A psychometrist can hold an object and pick up images, sometimes vibrations, etc. A dowser can walk over a landscape and tell where the water or the mineral. Psychic photography, the ability to pick up an image, is comparable to picking up a clairvoyant image. You're simply using another medium. Photography is a receptive vehicle because it is silver. It has a vibration already. Sometimes the image is impressed while I'm developing. Sometimes it's impressed while it's in the camera. You don't need a camera. You simply need some kind of sensitized paper or film. The silver salts are a receptive vehicle. One of the most spectacular series was with a woman, Jerry Isaacson, who at that time was living in Santa Cruz. And I photographed her in a sequence of photographs in which she was doing a massage. And in the 5 frames that ensued, she became less and less visible. My experiences have been that white light is projected from the healer, and that they become transparent. Transparency and a luminosity seems to be prevalent in those photographs I've made of the healers.
In one remarkable photograph, a human face stares at us from another time and space.
After a seance, I wanted to see what I might pick up, because I was still feeling, as I generally do after a seance, the room is very, very strong because you've been building the energies, so-called, in that environment. The so-called upper levels of consciousness are apparently available more frequently to more and more people these days for whatever reasons we don't know. And they seem to go in cycles. And they tend to come in turbulent periods of time.
Perhaps we are still evolving. It seems very possible that the brain, even now, has capabilities which are still untapped. Dr. Michael Graves is a neurologist in Los Angeles and is keenly aware of the bewildering complexity of the mind.
How the brain actually works when we do something as simple as think or say a sentence is something that we know really very little about. As clinical neurologists, we know that certain parts of the brain can be destroyed and the individual doesn't suffer. So there are parts of the brain with no obvious, easily identifiable function, but I believe that there must be some function for all parts of the brain. Modern brain scans actually give you a picture that looks as if someone's head has been sliced into serial sections, just as like a loaf of bread is cut. This is a cross-section of the patient's brain. The intensity of the color indicates the intensity of metabolism of the brain tissue. For example, here we see a red area in the temporal lobe of the brain. That's the part of the brain which is metabolizing or using energy the most intensely. Other areas are yellow or even blue. They're using energy less intensely. This technique could tell us what part of the brain is most intensely operating during any mental function, including telekinesis or any psychic phenomenon. Once we get that step is accomplished, there would still be unanswered questions as to how that part of the brain did that job.
In Waterville, Maine, the Veilleur family has confounded skeptics with their ability to capture ghost images on film. For 15 years, they have explored the natural hunting grounds of ghosts and have taken photographs that raise questions about man's true nature and the limits of our physical reality. Their odyssey began with a simple parlor game, which evolved into a dialogue with an entity that became their spirit guide. Richard Veilleur records the sessions.
Could you tell us how he passed away?
A, C, C, I, D, E.
Ouija first started in December of 1965, and it started as sort of a parlor game or as an amusement.
F, R, I.
The personality which introduced itself was ACL, or Anne Caroline Lowe. She gave information concerning herself as to where she was buried, the inscription on her gravestone, location of the cemetery, and so forth. I friend family. That's what I get out.
Would it be possible to photograph you?
Yes.
They were given the location of Anne Caroline Lowe's gravesite. With some trepidation, they visited the site and took this photograph of their young spirit guide. Though they photographed in a wide variety of situations, researchers couldn't find any deception involved in their method.
The personal reason to enter parapsychology was to determine the nature of the pictures and of the scripts. Is it possible to communicate with the deceased through Ouija? Is it possible to photograph the dead?
Who is communicating?
Certain communicators would inform us that there is a return process from their so-called reality to come back into ours in order to communicate. They would have to pass through a tunnel or an alleyway. The opening at the beginning is very wide, and as they come closer to our own reality, it becomes narrower and narrower. They would see us as if steam vapor and water droplets would be falling upon a piece of glass. Thoughtography and psychic photography or spirit photography or paranormal imagery. If you can't see the image, you're using a thoughtographic process. What we have to determine is what intelligence is producing the phenomenon. Is it our own unconscious, or are we actually photographing a deceased, and is that deceased thoughtgraphically impressing its image or another image upon our plate?
In 1966, in Denver, Colorado, a series of tightly controlled experiments are conducted. Researchers are checking and numbering fresh film and new cameras. The subject of these experiments is Ted Sirios, a Chicago bellhop with an incredible mind and an incredible thirst to match. Ted Sirios' ability is the power to project his thoughts onto film. During the experiments, researchers take the pictures while Ted stares into the camera. His concentration is intense. His pulse rate rises to 120 or more. The results are staggering. Images of all kinds begin appearing on the film. A target photograph, unseen by Ted and known to only 2 of the researchers, is the image that Ted tries to duplicate. Sometimes, when he is sure he has the photograph, he shouts, "I got it that time." An amazing aspect of the pictures is that they often contain small errors in form. They are not quite exact duplicates, like the inverted strut of this plane. It is as though that part of his brain that does these things can't make up its mind about the target picture. Again and again, he matches the target pictures until it is difficult to doubt that he is actually doing what he says he is. One of the most spectacular demonstrations of all takes place in a Colorado television station. In a moment of bravado, Ted claims that he can actually put images onto the videotape. Here are the results of that experiment. Convention tells us that this should not be possible. But if these images don't come from the mind of Ted Sirios, where do they come from? Images from the far reaches of our imagination. These ghostly faces look at us from behind the veil that hides the mysteries of life and death and make us wonder about the reality of ghosts.